Hello and welcome. I am so glad you are with me today. We want to talk today about some things that you're not going to see a lot of conversation about in other places, because we are going to talk a lot about the nitty-gritty, behind the scenes, what goes on with building a business in Iridology, including Iridology in your business. So I'm so glad you're with me today, and I would love it if you would interact with me and post comments, whether you're with me on Facebook or on the webinar live. When you see me looking away, I'm just monitoring my other computer, which is showing me the Facebook stream, so that I can make sure that we are answering their questions and acknowledging them as they come in. So I'm not being rude, I'm just checking the other media. Before we take a moment, I'm going to invite you to pop on over to iridology.education. There will be a little pop-up box there. And if you enter your information there, you will be able to download a constitutional Iridology map. So you will enter your information, you'll get an email back, and in that email will be the link for the download. Today, a lot of what I want to do is to help eradicate misinformation that is out there about Iridology, about having an Iridology business. And this is really important because so many people think that all you do is you study Iridology and then you start practicing as an Iridologist. And I want to share with you that that is not how this works. So I'm going to be brutally honest. I'm going to tell you the side that so many instructors are not going to tell you, so that you can make informed decisions about what you want to do if you either are studying Iridology or if you want to study Iridology. So again, welcome. I'd love it if you would take a moment and introduce yourself, regardless of which platform you're with me on, and maybe let me know where you're from and a little bit about your background, so that I can make sure that I answer questions in a way that is relevant to you. That is so important. If you're investing this time, I want it to be time that is going to be well spent as opposed to badly wasted. Okay. Alrighty, so brief introduction of myself, just so that you'll understand where I'm coming from and why I feel qualified to share this information with you. I got into holistic healing over 4 decades ago, and I got into it because as a very young adult, I had health problems. The medical world seemed unable to answer my questions, to tell me whether it was caused by this or by that or whatever it was. And so I got frustrated, and that was when I was blessed to begin learning, to have the opportunity to begin learning about natural healing. It started out first with nutrition and learning a little bit more about nutrition, learning a little bit about herbs, and launching from there. I have never looked back. I did go to university. I was studying to be a school teacher. I had been there for 3 years. I actually had enough credits to graduate, but I didn't have enough in any one major, because I flip-flopped from early childhood and elementary education as a dual major into secondary, so into high school, and didn't like that one little bit. And as a result, kind of hamstrung myself and was not able to graduate before I really started getting serious about learning holistic healing, and then got married, and the rest is history. I have been in this industry for 4 decades now. And, oh, and this is brilliant. And Lori, so good. Thank you for introducing yourself and sharing with me a little bit about your business. I truly appreciate that. With my 4 decades in the business, I have worked with a wide variety of practitioners, studied under a wide variety of teachers, and had clients that have had just about every problem you can imagine. Over the years, I've authored and self-published and self-distributed several books: Pregnancy Naturally, The Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature's Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy, levels 1 and 2, and the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology textbook, which is the textbook that my Iridology students get to download when they take my course. I've also taught a lot of classes over the years. Teaching is actually in my blood. I am the third generation of teachers in my family. Although, my grandmother was an elementary school teacher, my dad was elementary, junior high, and into senior high. He worked in special ed. And then, of course, I was training to be a public school teacher, but have ended up instead teaching adults, which for me is a much better fit. The courses that I've created and taught way back before the internet, I created and taught Herbology Level 1, which was 20 hours of practical use of commercially available herbs for family use. So it was about how to use things that you could buy in the health food stores, for instance. The students who did that program loved it and they begged for more. So we created a level 2, which went deeper. It was 16 hours of advanced training on commercially available products. I also designed and taught biokinesiology and color therapy level 1 and level 2. For a few years, I was a certified prenatal educator with the International Childbirth Education Association, because fertility and pregnancy are real passions for me. And so I taught prenatal classes for a couple of years, and that was a ton of fun. Then I decided that all of this iridology training that I'd already had and that I had been updating, and I migrated from Jensen to Constitutional, decided that I needed to be teaching this on a much bigger scale to practitioners. And so I created the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System, which is it covers all of the curriculum that IPA, which is the International Iridology Practitioners Association, requires in their level 1 and level 2 programs. I've chosen to teach it as one whole program instead of 2 pieces of programs, because I wanted my students to get the context of everything from the beginning through to the end of the program without having that option of dropping out in the middle, right? Really important to me that my students don't drop out in the middle. I also became, about 5 or 6 years ago, although they issue these certificates every 2 years, a certified instructor with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. And we'll talk a little bit at the end of our session today about the upcoming course, Dynamic Iridology Assessment System. Alrighty, so let's get into this. Actually, let's back that up one. And what I want to do is take off the screen share. Whoops, go to that. Hello. So that we can have a conversation. Now I am watching, I think I'm watching my comments. I'm not seeing my comment box anymore, which is not fun. Just give me a little second to figure out what's going on, because something is going funky here. All right, there we go. I just need to be able to see the chat box in the side. Okay, I've got that there. So if you have a question as we're working, since I have lost my chat box, there we go. Ta-da, okay, I have my chat box, this is good. Please ask questions as we go. If you have questions about things that we're talking about, I would love to answer your questions and have a conversation. We will be finished up at the top of the hour because I have a client then. So here we go. And again, I'm going to be looking off to another screen to answer questions or to read my notes, making sure I've got everything that we need to have done. So I have taught a lot of webinars and Facebook Live events in an effort to answer a lot of questions, the common questions about iridology and about implementing it in a practice. As all of my students who've ever done any of my courses will tell you, I absolutely love questions from my students. The questions tell me many things. They tell me that my students are paying attention and they're processing. They're not just taking what I'm telling them at face value, they are processing and turning it over in their mind. So I love questions. Questions also give me the opportunity to reteach information if if it didn't land straight the first time. And I love having that too. So if you have questions, please be sure to ask them, because today's entire session is going to be about answering questions. Answering questions. These are answers from my perspective with 40 years in the industry. All right, so question number 1. How does using Iridology with my clients help my clients? And how does it help my business? All righty, so what I find with Iridology is and this is a benefit to both my client and myself, it saves time, because I ask my clients a few questions like, what would you like my help with? And then I do photos of their eyes. I pop them up on my computer, or if it's a virtual appointment, they will have sent me the best photos they can get with their smartphone. Sometimes we need to go back and forth a few times to get the best photos, and then we book the appointment. And so doing Iridology saves time, because when I see the eyes and I analyze them in the context of my client's main questions, it helps me to understand why they've got the concerns they've got, physically, emotionally, whatever. And that helps me to laser in on where we need to be focusing. I find that Iridology helps to create a rapport really quickly, because when I can analyze the eye in the context of what my client's concerns are, I can focus my questions on things that are of direct relevance to my question or to my client, rather than asking a shotgun pattern of questions. That shotgun pattern is what we were usually taught to do in herb school and nutrition school, right? You start broad and you narrow down. Iridology helps me to start narrow, which really develops rapport. That helps me to focus on my client's needs very precisely. And that is so important. It's what we don't get from many medical practitioners. And I'm not dissing the medical world. They are what they are. We've helped to create them the way they are. So it's partially our fault that they are that way, right? And so this just helps me to laser in. Iridology teaches me what questions to ask. And that's a beautiful thing, because as I ask the right questions, I get the best answers. So important. I love that Iridology is non-invasive. I can do Iridology photos on very young children, which is wonderful. I love doing Iridology with school-age children, especially children from about grades 4 and up, because they are very communicative, and oftentimes they might have had rough experiences already in school. When I look at the eyes and I understand how they're put together, and I understand from there what some of their challenges might be, I can find a way to express the positive. I can find a way to laser in on their weaknesses, but turn it into a lesson and a blessing for them, so that they understand when they do these things, we're going to see these results that will be so much better for them. So I can really help to light a fire under them and get them moving in the right direction. Parents often need to hear this too, right? So when I do Iridology, the benefit to my clients, how it helps my clients, helps me and my business, is that it really gives me a deeper understanding of my clients' needs, and my clients feel so very heard when we talk about what I see in their eyes. So many of the skills we learn as holistic health practitioners are standalone skills. They are, herbology, nutrition, whatever you're doing, standalone skill. It can be practiced on its own. Iridology is most powerful when it's combined with those modalities. I often describe it as saying, if I look in your eyes and I can tell you where the weak links are, that does nobody any good unless I can direct you as to what to do about it, right? It's like taking your car to the garage, to the mechanic. The mechanic goes, yep, I know exactly what's wrong with this, but I don't have any tools to do car repairs. You're going to have to take this assessment of what's wrong to Joe down the street. He's got the tools to do the repairs, but he doesn't know how to do the assessment. Right? That's learning Iridology, but not having herbology, or not having nutrition, or not having aromatherapy, or something else that you can combine with it. So I strongly encourage all of my students to not only learn iridology, but to have a modality along with it. What styles of iridology have I learned? Now, if you've been online, you've seen a lot of different teachers, you've seen a lot of different styles. Back when I started learning iridology in like 1979, the only style that was available where I lived was Bernard Jensen. And Jensen was an amazing healer. He was an amazing man. We love that he kept iridology alive during the Cold War, when information and research from Europe was not coming into the US or Canada. Since then, however, constitutional iridology, which is based in a lot of the German research, is alive and well. It's been brought to North America about 30 to 35 years ago. It is alive and well. And so I've studied extensively in constitutional. I've done some study in RAID as well, which is an emotional iridology assessment. So I've got all of this under my belt. I've left most of the Jensen training behind because it just simply doesn't keep up with the research. And so I love now working with the constitutional. When I first started learning constitutional, I'd heard about it through a very circuitous route. And back then, the only training that was available was VHS videotapes. If you know what a VHS videotape is, give me a 1 in the comments box, regardless of what platform you're with me on. If you know what a VHS videotape is, I have just dated myself seriously with that. But I studied those videotapes, I don't know how many times, watch a bit, pause it, take notes, study, watch a bit, pause it, take notes, study. That was my early foundation. And then I was blessed to be able to bring Bill Caradonna to Canada twice to teach programs here. And that was absolutely brilliant. And I'm still in touch with Bill. He is still a very valued and cherished mentor and friend. And when I've got a question, I take it to Bill. Back then he was a registered pharmacist. Now he is a naturopath with a very busy practice, and he no longer teaches iridology, but I love that he is still willing to mentor me after nearly 30 years. I love it. How to include iridology in an appointment. Okay, so I kind of alluded to this earlier. If I am doing a face-to-face appointment, client comes in, we do the hi, hello, how are you? I have them sign a release form, an informed consent form. I do not ever have them fill out an intake as in a questionnaire, because iridology is going to be my questionnaire. Then I use my special iridology camera to take the photographs, pop those photos up on my computer, and from there, I analyze and assess the iris in the context of what my client needs. I craft the initial program. I never give them the full meal deal. You'll never get an every iris marking type of assessment out of me, because that is not useful. Every marking is not important to where my client is right now. The most important thing is taking my client from where they are now up a step in their health, and to build the program in manageable steps. Now, with the interesting changes that have come about because of COVID and lockdowns, I've created some videos there on my YouTube channel on how to get decent photos with a smartphone. Easiest to do typically if you've got a person helping you. And when someone sends me an inquiry saying, I live in Timbuktu, and I would like to have you do some health work with me. Can we do this? I'll say yes, but I'll say what I would like to do first is have you watch these videos on how to do your photos. Take your photos, send them to me first. I will tell you if they are usable or not. If they are not usable, I will coach you as to what's not quite good with them and how to fix that. Try again, and when we finally have photos that are usable, I will send you a link to book your appointment. Right? That way, we're not in that first appointment, and we're not in a first appointment and having to look at photos that are just a waste of time. That's really important to me for both my client and myself, that the photos they send me are at least usable. Will a photo with a smartphone ever be as good as it would be with a 24 megapixel that has proper lighting and proper lenses to do close-up photography like that? No, it never will be. And that's why I say a usable photo, not an optimal photo, okay? So really important that we keep that in mind. But that's how I include iridology in an assessment. I only ever focus on 2 or 3 markings in an eye. And those markings have to tie together and they have to relate to what the client wants help with. And I explain what the markings are, how they work together, what they teach me, and what that means we need to be doing. All right, so that's how I integrate it in an appointment. How do you market iridology? Now, we can't land on this really heavily. That would be like, I mean, I've taken thousands of dollars worth of training on marketing. That tells you how many hours were involved in it. And I'm doing more marketing training now because it's constantly changing. So what we need to know is that marketing has changed a lot in the last 40 years. We cover this a lot in the dynamic iridology assessment system office hours, which is the support side of the dynamic iridology assessment system program. What you need to remember is there is a ton of competition out there and the market is still not saturated. There is still room for more holistic practitioners. There's more room for iridologists that are well trained, but you have to know how to get your message out there. You have to remember that most people don't actually know what iridology is. Not only do they not know how to pronounce it or spell it, but they don't know what it is, right? So if you already have an email list, you want to start educating people on that list about iridology, particularly if it's a new skill. You might think, well, I just wrote about that, 4 months ago. Write about it again. Unless your open rates are 100%, you've got a lot of people who are not seeing your messages, right? So repeat your message, rewrite it a little bit so it's fresh, give it a new subject line, but start with your email list. If you've got a Facebook page that's business oriented, post about it there. Do a little bit of training about what iridology is, how it works, how you incorporate it in your appointments, what a client can expect from an iris assessment. But people have got to know. We don't have little LED printouts on our forehead that say, I am an iridologist, I can help you, talk to me about this now. We have to be putting it out there constantly. If you don't have an email list, if you don't have a Facebook group, and if you are able to, if you live in an area that's not under lockdown, and you're able to do free introductory workshops, find ways to promote that, and draw people in, choose, and don't lead with iridology. If they don't know what it is, if they've never heard of it, they're not going to come. You want to talk about things that they want to know about. So maybe your big focal point, the thing that you really love working with, is gut problems. So do some free workshops on gut problems and incorporate some iridology into those workshops, where you maybe show an iris map and show where the intestinal tract and the stomach show up, and then teach a little bit about some of the markers that you might see in someone who's got some problems in those areas. Right, so incorporate it as a way of introducing it, because people don't know what you do until you tell them, and they actually don't know what you do until you tell them about 10 or 15 times, right? Repetition, repetition, repetition. All right, why do I love constitutional iridology? I love it because it is based on science. I love it for all the reasons I mentioned in my first question that I answered about how it helps me create rapport, it speeds up the process, it helps me laser in. It's just a beautiful tool for integrating so much. I love it because there's ongoing research. And that's really important. That's where Jensen has stopped. That's where so many styles that are out there have stopped. They're no longer doing research. They're believing old paradigms and they're not continuing to develop. Good science develops, good science evolves, good science keeps asking questions. If the science has stopped asking questions, it's a dead science and it's going nowhere. I love it because I am still supported by my instructor, right? I've had lots of iridology instructors, but the only one who still supports me is Bill Cardona. The others have, if I was to reach out to them with a question, and of course that would be a Jensenian question since Bill was my constitutional teacher, they would shut me down because, and I know this because I've tried way back, even when I was still just fresh out of learning, they shut me down. And so I love it because I'm supported. And that is the type of support I also offer my students. I model Bill's behavior towards my students, which means even after you've long since graduated from my program, if you've got an iridology question, I have venues set up for you to ask those questions and get the answers. How do you learn iridology? Well, I'm going to suggest the best way to learn it is with a live teacher, or at least in a venue where you can ask questions in some way, shape, or form. I think the absolute worst way to learn iridology is by reading a book. I think the worst way to learn iridology is by watching social media, because you are going to find what so many of my students and grads have said. They tried to teach themselves from books and from social media, and what they got was confusion, because there is so much conflicting information out there. So I think it is in your best interest, if you want to learn iridology, to find an iridology instructor who teaches in a way that resonates with you. If that's me, I'm lucky. If it's not me, then whoever you go to is also lucky, right? So search for a teacher, look for samples of their teaching, talk to other students that have been with them to see how the teacher communicates, what kinds of support is available. This is so, so important. We've talked a little bit about how to practice during lockdown, and that's with doing your virtual photos. Now, because constitutional, we don't do photos every appointment, right? Because we know the iris is genetically set, it's not going to change. The sclera may change, and the cornea may change. And so we might see some pigment come up in the iris, but we're not going to see anything heal in the iris. And so I don't do photos every appointment. I do them maybe once every year or two, particularly if we've got a significant symptom change. I want to look at the sclera. I want to see if we've got some new pigments developed, things like that. And so during lockdown, for my clients who typically have been face-to-face, we've been working off photos I took a year or two ago, right? Lockdown or working internationally, we just use our smartphone. Is certification important? Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions come in, so please pop in questions. Hello, Faith. Thanks for joining us on Facebook. If you've got more questions, pop them in so I can make sure I get them answered for you. Is certification important, and what does it mean to be certified? So when people ask me about certification, I have to answer honestly and say, what is your goal in learning iridology? And what would be your goal for wanting certification? I've never had a client ask me, am I certified? Okay. And that's really interesting. They're all intrigued by iridology. They all want to know, what I can see in their eyes, but I've never had anyone ask, are you certified? Remember that iridology is not federally regulated, which means your certification is only really valid with the organization you are certified with. All right, so choose your course well and understand that that is true of every iridology certification program. The government could not care less if they tried when it comes to iridology. All right, it is not important to them. And so for some people, certification is important because they work in a professional office. Maybe they're a holistic practitioner that works with a chiropractor or a naturopath, and then the chiropractor or naturopath wants them to have that certification. For some people, certification is important as a sense of completion. I've done this, that's the end point, go me. That's great. That's perfectly fine. Most people actually, once they've actually had the training, don't need to be certified. Okay, so just want you to understand that. If you're in a situation where you need to have errors and omission insurance, which is the holistic equivalent of malpractice insurance, they may want to know that you have studied. They may want to see something that says you've completed a course. They likely won't require you to be certified. So certification is a personal choice. I have many students who say, I want it because it's important to me. Great, let me help you get there. I have other students who say, I just want the information. I just want the most up-to-date information. I want to know I've got ongoing support. I don't care if I'm certified because my insurance company doesn't want it. My clients don't ask for it. My state or province or country don't care. Great, I'll teach you anyways. It doesn't matter to me what your end game is. What does it take to be a successful iridologist? We have to study hard. The course is full. It's not something you can learn from a little pamphlet. You need to be able to take correction. When I teach iridology and I teach it live via webinars, I have no problems if a student is making an error, giving an incorrect answer as we're doing some out loud practices, and everything we do is verbal. So I've got an iris photo on the screen. I'm going to ask a client, what does this marking mean? Or I want you to teach me about this kind of a marking in this eye. And if they're giving me information that is incorrect, I am going to correct them. Yes, in front of the other students. Yes, gently. Yes, as an instructive point, never as a you dumb bunny. How come you don't know that? It's always, oops, let me correct you on that. Let me give you better information. I think you've got these ideas crossed. Let's go back and make sure we've got them straight. Okay, so you have to be able to take correction. You need to be willing to keep learning. Anyone who says they know everything there is to know about iridology is lying, because research is ongoing. Our understanding of the human body is ongoing. Our understanding of how different markings interplay within an eye is building. So no one ever knows everything. You have to be willing to let go of old ideas. I was trained in Jensen. I practiced Jensen solidly for 5 years and then iffy for 5 years because it wasn't my happy place until I started learning constitutional. And I had to let go of almost all of the Jensen training because constitutional is very different. And even within constitutional, as it evolves, we have to let go of things that are being disproved and adapt to things that are being proven correct, right? So you've got to be able to let go of things that are inaccurate. You also need to be able to explain things clearly in plain English. We practice this a lot in my class as we're saying, looking at an eye, and we've got a case history with it, a little, what the client's concerns are. I will ask my students one at a time, what is one question based on their history and on their eye that you want an answer to? What is a question you would ask? And often the questions are like, how's your liver function? And my response to that is, how does your client know what their liver function is? Break it down to things your client understands. Right? Do you have problems digesting fats? Is your skin okay? What's your immune system like? What are your moods like? Those can all be liver related questions. Okay. And so you need to be able to ask questions and then give answers in very plain English. It is really important that you have another modality. I am always saddened when someone has done an iridology course somewhere and they call me and say, I just need to talk to you. And I'll give anybody 30 minutes of free coaching as far as building their business. That's not a big deal to me. It's something I wish had been offered to me. And if I can help people along the way, that's great. And they'll say, I've done this iridology course. How do I start my business? And my answer is, what other modalities do you have? Well, what do you mean? Do you have nutrition? Do you have herbology? Do you have homeopathy? Do you have naturopathy? Do you have aromatherapy? Do you have flower essences? Do you have anything? Nothing. Then you can't start a practice. You need a modality to use with iridology in order to do iridology well. Okay, so that's really important. You have to have a really solid understanding of anatomy and physiology also. It does no good to learn an iris marker if you don't understand the body. Is this all making sense? Is this all making sense? If it is, just give me a comment of makes sense wherever you're with me at, whichever platform you're with me. Does this make sense? Right? And these are the things that other instructors won't teach you. I know there are other instructors out there who are saying, I will teach anyone. What I have found is when I've had students that have enrolled in my course without having anatomy and physiology, without having a modality, they drop out because they get frustrated because iridology doesn't make sense. And I don't want their money as a student. I want them to have that foundation of anatomy, physiology, and hopefully at least one modality before we build the iridology on top of that, right? So this is all very important. And I see some questions coming in. I will round myself back to some of these when we're done here, if there's time. Is it a smart idea to invest in a course right now? Can iridology be learned without a face-to-face course? So, you know, if you're still under lockdown and you don't get to have face-to-face things, I'm here to tell you that I think it is a much stronger way to learn iridology to learn it online. Now, why would I say that? Because when you're looking at a face-to-face course, you're often looking at someone who is teaching this as a 40-hour class. So it's 6 or 7 hours a day for 5 or 6 days. And it's a lot of information, just push, 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 push. I don't know about you. My brain hits a saturation point, and after that, I don't learn anything. And it doesn't matter to me what kind of a course I'm taking. I get to the point where my brain is just mush. When we do it online, we can do it 2 hours at a time, introduce a concept, practice it, send you off to work with it for a week, come back the next week. Do you have any questions? What did you find when you use this? Okay, let's settle that, make sure it's all good. Let's build on that. Let's do the next layer of concept. So I find, and you'll find that my student testimonials are such that they're all saying that doing it 2 hours a week is a brilliant pace. They have time to study, they have time to practice, they have time to come up with questions so that they feel comfortable going to the next level. Okay, how do you find a good course or instructor? Ask around, search YouTube, look for different teachers, and really listen like to a full webinar or a full recording that they've done. See if what they're saying makes sense. See if they are breaking things down into steps that you understand. See if it looks like they are anticipating your questions and answering your questions even before you have them. That is likely a good way to find a good course or instructor. Look for testimonials. If you go to the IPA website, iridologyassn.org, and look at instructors and flip through the instructors and read comments that students have left about those instructors. That will also give you an idea of whether the instructor is one that you might want to work with. How can we take our iridology practice from a paid by the hour financially limiting business to a business that does not have an income cap? Oh, and I love this. Lou on Facebook is saying this is all making good sense. Oh, Lou, thank you for that. That's what I strive for, is clarity, and it makes sense. So how do we go from an hourly income, which is very limiting, to something broader than that? One of the things that I encourage each of my students to do is to work with a product line. A product line that when you buy it, you can resell it at a profit. Now, that is not, in my opinion, a conflict of interest. If you've ever gone to a health food store or the vitamin section of your grocery store and you've looked at that wall of vitamins and someone said, you need a vitamin C, how many different formats, strengths, potencies, qualities of vitamin C, how do you know which one to choose? My feeling in promoting a particular product line or two is that it gives me an advantage, and I'm not just talking financial here. It means that if my client is using the product I've recommended, I know that they're getting exactly what I wanted them to have. I know that product inside out, upside down, backwards, forwards, probably in French. No, I'm actually not bilingual, but I know that product really well. So if my client runs into a problem with that and they reach back to me and say, hey, I started taking this, yeah, I've got diarrhea all of a sudden, I can understand why it's doing that and I can coach them on how to correct it. And so the fact that I'm going to earn a bit of an income from that product is almost irrelevant. The benefit to my client is significant when they are working with products that I know very well. And the fact that I can make a commission or a markup on that is just fine. So I encourage all of my students to have a product line that they work with. If I become an iridologist, do I have to buy an expensive iridology camera? So we're going to go back to that mechanics analogy I used a few minutes ago. I don't know why that word didn't want to come out. You've got to have the tools for the job. So yes, you can absolutely start with using your smartphone. It is a place to start. And what I encourage then is I encourage my students, number one, to not buy a camera at the beginning of the course. I want them to wait till they finish the course and know that they love iridology and have been practicing integrating it into their business. And they can do that using their smartphone. Then I suggest that every time they do iridology and they're charging for it, which they do from the get-go, I encourage them to take a certain percentage of that money from that consultation, their hourly fee, and stash it in an envelope or in a bank account to save up so that a year or two down the road, they've got enough money to just buy the right camera equipment outright. And I am happy to coach my students on camera equipment. And if I have two different camera setups, if they purchase one of the types of setups that I have, then I can coach them with it on a tech basis. I can teach them about shutter speeds and about f-stops and about using the lighting and how changing from one light to two lights is going to alter their photos and how to understand all of that. So that's stuff that we cover in the office hours support that I have with my program as well. So do you have to buy one? Well, not right at the outset, but if you're going to be professional, you're going to need one. And you need to work your way there. I do encourage all of my students to eventually get that professional equipment to learn how to print up 4" by 6" photos. What I like to do is I print up the photos for my client. And when we talk about certain markings, I use a fine tip Sharpie and I label those markings on the photo. But I also on the photo put my name and phone number and I put their name. And whether it's the right eye or the left eye, because they're never going to remember how to tell which is which. And that serves as a business card. I've had people bring those photos back to me 20 years later saying, I found these, this is so cool. And then we can see how the photo has aged because they yellow with time, right? Sometimes we can take new photos and then we've got that comparison. Not a really good before and after comparison. We aren't going to compare overall color, but we can see if new markings, new pigment specifically has come up, or if we're looking at the sclera, we can see if new blood vessels are more obvious there. Okay, so a couple of questions here. Do you promote iridology itself to recruit clients, or do you promote instead your consulting services with iridology as an assessment tool? I promote my consulting services. And I don't often talk about iridology in the promotion because people don't understand what it is. I explain iridology when I am with the client. Now, that's for face-to-face, but virtual sessions, they're usually reaching out to me because they want iridology. So we've got two different education levels there, and they each get a different approach in how they get marketed to. What has been my most effective way to recruit clients? Word of mouth. Word of mouth is always the single best way, right? And I've tried things like offering incentives to my existing clients to talk about, if you refer someone in and they come in for an appointment, I'll give you 25% off your next appointment, things like that. And I found that that did not build my business at all. Some clients would do it, some wouldn't. And the clients who were doing it were referring people in anyways, right? So that was not effective. The most effective way of recruiting clients is simply word of mouth. Do a good job for the people you are working with now, and they will chat you up to everybody. Okay, so that is really, really important. Alrighty. So let's go back to the screen share. Right here. There we go. Alrighty, so the next Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course is starting on September 9th. And if you have been hanging out with me for any length of time and you're thinking, yeah, I think I better get in on this course, pop on over to this URL, iridology.education/early-enrollment. And I'm going to really say do it today, because there is a time-limited offer that disappears tomorrow night at 6, and that is to spread your enrollment, your tuition payments out over 7 payments instead of 5. Okay, so for those of you who are with me on the webinar, oops, I do that wrong every time. Let me just do this the right way. There we go. This will make a difference. Now you can see it in your messages there in your chat box. So again, if you've been hanging with me and you already know you want the course, hop on over here. If you're thinking you might want to take advantage of that promotion and you're brand new to me, hop on over there as well. If you're brand new to me and you're thinking, I don't know, I need to hang out with you a little bit more, then instead of going into the early enrollment URL, join me for a webinar on July 22nd. And you'll see in your comments on the webinar, you'll see the URL there, tiny URL /ie.2021-July-22. This is an info session about the course. This is going to give you more information about who the course is designed for. I only work with practitioners or people who are actively studying to become practitioners. You have to have an anatomy and physiology course under your belt already. Okay, I assume that you've got that background because I talk at that level with organ interactions. And if you don't have that A and P under your belt, you're going to get lost and you'll drop out. And I do not want that. We will talk about what's included in the course, all of the hours of training, all of the downloadable learning materials, all of the recordings, all of the ongoing support that goes on for as long as I'm teaching courses after you graduate. I don't know of any other teacher who offers that much support. I've got students who are practicing and, like all of us, have questions. Actually, they're graduates. They've been graduated for a few years, and they still come back into our office hours calls to ask questions and to share cases, right? All right, so let's do a really quick assessment before we wrap up. You want to look at an eye and see how this goes? You ready for this? Okay, so here we are. This is a female client in her mid-30s. She came to me with fertility issues. She'd been trying to get pregnant for the last couple of years, and she had conceived once and had miscarried. So when we look at her eyes, it looks like it's built up in layers. We've got some things that look recessed and some things that look very, very high on the surface. So we look for layers. These are layers of fiber in the eye. We also need to look for shading. We've got some things that are quite dark. That tells us we are looking deeper into the eye. We've got fibers that look like they're laid on top of the eye. This tells us even more things. And it's not uncommon for this piece, the collarette, to look like it's laid on top in a dark brown eye. Now, this eye in particular suggests there may be a personal or family history of what is known as the MTHFR defect. If you're familiar with that, you know that, or if you're not, you know that it means that the liver does not methylate folic acid or B12 very well. And as you know, if someone is trying to get pregnant, they've got to have the folic acid in order to conceive and in order to hold the pregnancy, right? And in order for the baby to have the optimal chance of being well. But it can't be folic acid, it has to be the folate. And so the MTHFR defect suggests that this woman cannot take folic acid and turn it into folate. This also suggests that there are inherent inefficiencies, like passed down through the generations with the liver. And we also see that she has a lot of these little wrinkles in her eye that may also have an impact indirectly on her fertility. We've got this cloudiness towards the outer layer of the eye, which suggests that she may have problems, insufficiencies with her liver enzymes in metabolizing carbohydrates properly. So when I spoke with her and I saw that, and she's only in her mid-30s, that's very young to be creating this white cloud in the cornea over the edge of the iris. I asked her about carb cravings. She said yes. I asked her if anyone had ever suggested she might be insulin resistant. She said yes. I said, had anyone ever suggested she might have polycystic ovarian syndrome? She said yes. I said, all right, let's clean up your diet, because that's the very first step here, is to get rid of the refined carbs. So I did not need to go into absolutely every marker, because every marker is not important to the question of fertility. So what we did with this client was we cleaned up her diet dramatically. She is Filipino and has a very high diet, high in white rice and white sugar and fizzy drinks and things like that. So we cleaned that up. She was overweight when we started, and she lost about 30 pounds quite quickly with cleaning up her diet, because we were reversing the insulin resistance. She did not get pregnant before she decided that this was too much work. All right, we'd worked together for about 4 months, and she just decided that this was way too much work. Even though she was feeling better, we were seeing her cycles settle down into a nice 28 to 30 day pattern. So I don't know what has happened with her since then, but we certainly improved her health and took her in the right direction. She may have conceived since then, for all I know, which would be wonderful. And I would wish that for her. That is really how quick an iris assessment should be in a clinical setting. Don't get bogged down in details. Focus on things that are important to the client's situation. That's it. That's all. So again, the course info webinar is happening July 22nd. I would love it if you are looking for more information about a course. If you would join me there, we will do some iris analyses as well. Again, we'll talk about the ins and the outs, the tuition, the support, what you can expect to learn, who it's good for, how it will help you, all that kind of stuff, so you can make an informed decision. Sarah on Dynamic or on the Facebook group is saying, great analysis, thank you. You are welcome, Sarah. It is just that simple. When you know your anatomy and physiology, when you understand the eyes well, which I really strive to teach that to my students, help them understand that, an iris assessment in session should be just that simple. If you, for those of you who are watching this on Instagram, please DM me if you need that URL. Lori is asking, do I follow with a written report for the client? No, I do not. My purpose in doing Iridology this way is to not create more work for myself. That is one of the reasons why I print up the little photos and I label them right there. What I do after that appointment is as before the client leaves that appointment, we schedule their next appointment for about a month away. I will go over what their homework is, and I will tease them a little and say, when you've done your homework, I expect to see these changes in your health. And when we see these changes in your health, we will move on to the next step, which will include, and I'll give a really broad general description of where we're heading, because that does three things. It teaches my client that I've heard them, I know where we're starting, and I know where we're going. Teaches my client they have to do their homework, because if they don't, they're not going to get to the next step. And it also teaches them that, actually, I covered two of those in the first one. I know where I'm going and I've got a plan, right? And so I don't give a written follow-up. I'm not a medical doctor. Giving a written follow-up would be giving a prescription, and I don't do that. So they're allowed to take notes. I give them a notepad and a paper, and I invite them to write down anything that they think is relevant or important. All right, and so that is how I operate with that. And that, my friends, is everything I've got for you. Thank you so much for being with me today. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. Bye for now.